And I'm sure our recent occupants of Ireland are quite happy on days like this. It's unique for them to have rain because an awful lot of them don't have rain in their own country, only from time to time. Now folks, this video is in relation to the reason why TDs don't give a fiddler's damn about you, me or anybody else between elections. But it's us citizens that's to blame due to uncounted votes exiting polling stations, which we shouldn't allow, and it stinks of suspicion. Hence the reason no political representative, even if they didn't do a hand's turn between one election and the other, will not have somewhat of a chance in getting back in the next election due to uncounted votes exiting your polling stations. Because what happens after voting hours is when the fraud actually happens, folks. It's covering up what already has been pre-planned in advance of all Irish elections. Now, this video is in relation to TD's attendance in Dáil, senators' attendance in the Senate. Absentee ministers have been castigated by Government Chief Whip Mary Butler and warned they will lose certain perks and privileges if they do not improve their Dáil attendance rate. In a hard-hitting letter seen last Sunday week, which was issued to all cabinet and junior ministers, Miss Butler expressed particular concern over Dáil cover. This refers to the practice whereby senior ministers send in lower-ranked ministers of state to answer topical questions, topical issues on matters of public concerns rather than attending themselves. In a sharp rebuke, Miss Butler told ministers that just 39 of 132 topical issues were answered by a relevant minister, a situation she described as completely unacceptable. And it's not too often I'll agree with any political representative, but agree with her on that. Typically, topical questions are scheduled for early in the morning and late at night. Opposition parties have become increasingly unhappy about the junior ministers being sent in to answer questions about departments they are not even in and issues they know very little about. However, concern has now reached the top level of government. But folks, it's only a myth that Ireland has government opposition. Because folks, realistically speaking, all political parties and independents are all the one, regardless what media tells Irish citizens. In Mary Butler's letter to ministers, Miss Butler said, "I am writing to you to ask you to renew efforts to ensure that Dáil and Shannon business for your department is taken by a relevant minister and that front bench cover is only used in emergencies or as a last resort." But if you're paid to do a job, folks, and you don't show up, normally it results in the likes of you, me or anybody else getting a P45. But once these, I don't know what you call them, they are allegedly elected to represent you, me or anybody else, they don't really give a shite, folks, because in the next election they will be re-elected due to uncounted votes exiting polling stations. In recent weeks, there have been numerous occasions in both the Dáil and Shannon where the lack of a relevant minister has been raised on the floor during both topical issues and commencements, as well as private members' bills and bills. So if they cared about their roles, which they don't really have to, but if they were genuinely representing Irish citizens, it is their duty to be there at these things. Miss Butler also noted that the matter of topical issues not being taken by an appropriate minister from a department has also been raised in correspondence and by opposition whips in the Business Committee of Dáil Éireann. And the Shannon Committee on Parliamentary Privileges and Oversight in relation to Shannon commencement. The Waterford TD told ministers she has been monitoring all topical issues in the Dáil since this provisional government, shall we say, took office. The situation since we returned for the autumn parliamentary session is completely unacceptable, as less than 1 in 3 topical issues have been answered by an appropriate line minister. 200,000 folks they're getting per year, plus. Not even to show up at these fucking meetings. The Chief Whip also told the front benchers the statistics for commencement matters in the Shannon are more disappointing. She also added front bench cover is being used excessively for the day-to-day business of the houses of the Oireachtas, and this practice must cease. Folks, this is really, Ireland is in shit at the moment, as you know yourselves, but these so-called political representatives are not doing any one of us, especially Irish-born citizens, any favours. Signalling her intention to clap down on the overuse of Dáil cover likes us, if I was a TD and now putting in some ye junior ones underneath me, you would be covering for me. But folks, the hopes of me ever being a TD in Ireland is slim and none. And the hopes of many that thinks that we can get into politics, you don't really get into politics unless you lick the arsehole of your county manager, your chief Garda superintendent, or your DPP. That's, you really have to lick up to them because they are the silent controllers of every county. Signalling her intentions to clap down on the overuse of Dáil cover, Miss Butler then reminded ministers that if, as a last resort, front bench cover is being used, her office has to be notified for approval. Of course it is if she's Chief Whip. She also warned the country's most powerful politicians. If an immediate alleged politicians, folks, because the word alleged must be put in everything in front of everything in relation to Ireland, because it has not been right since day one. It's still not right, and it never will be right. Maybe Ireland's new occupants, when they do really take over the country, will do it themselves, because the majority of Irish citizens has no intention of doing it. If an immediate improvement is not facilitated by all ministers, she will have to reconsider the appropriateness of the front bench cover for Dáil and Shannon business. She concluded, somewhat optimistically, many thanks for your cooperation in this matter. However, ministers are understood to be furious at the chastising tone of the Chief Whip's missive. In other words, folks, you're not supposed to talk to them like she has just done in the last week. But you know, I know, and everybody else knows what the majority of political representatives needs. One source close to Cabinet said they are fuming at the cheek. Even Micheál Martin wouldn't have the cheek to talk to them like that, and mind you, in his own head, he's another De Valera. He owns Fianna Fáil in his own head, and he owns Ireland. Cheek to talk to them like that, especially since he's never in the country himself. Like, for example, he's in Brussels at the moment. They see it as a total overreach by the chief whip. She's very high up the transfer list should new management come in. But sympathy for the ministers was in short supply among more junior colleagues. One government backbench TD said, we are already known as the do-nothing dole. Which they are, folks, because what have they done for Irish citizens since 2020? An awful lot of things that they should never have done. And now we have absentee ministers who seem to think it's beneath their important levels to come in and answer questions. Absentee levels of 66% are scandalous. It is leaving us very open to accusations of arrogance and a breakdown of discipline. Answering questions is part of the job. There was one poor junior minister recently who ended up answering 4 questions about 4 separate departments he knew absolutely nothing about. It is bringing us into disrepute. The source added, it's not just the opposition that are unhappy, but folks, we don't have government opposition is a myth in Ireland. The source added it's not just the opposition that are unhappy. Their own TDs in Fianna Gael and Fianna Fáil are furious. To be fair, some ministers, like Jim O'Callaghan, are very good attendees, but they are not happy with certain ministers. But it's very handy too for Jim O'Callaghan to be a very good attendee when he's living practically beside the place. But they are not happy with certain ministers who think answering serious questions is beneath them. Sure, what are they doing in politics so? They suggested maybe we should get ministerial fob cards to see what their Dáil chamber attendance rates are like. That was suggested before. It was supposed to be introduced, but it was never introduced. But folks, us citizens have an awful lot of... We are practically at the fault for the wrong representatives representing us across the country, which will remain the case due to uncounted votes exiting your polling stations nationwide. There's absolutely nothing wrong with citizens demanding boxes of their votes in their own polling stations to be dumped out in front of them and counted directly after voting hours in their own polling stations. Numbers can be passed on to a central. The outcome of these results in the country's polling stations can then be forwarded on to a central forum of technology. Let it be one laptop accepting the results of all polling stations individually, because citizens have every right to see exactly what happened on the day if their chosen representative is not elected. So it would be a suggestion between now and future elections, if Irish citizens got their act together and were seriously concerned about their own country, making sure or demanding that these election boxes contents are thrown out on the desk in front of them after voting hours and counted there and then in front of the public, and none of this shite of uncounted votes exiting polling stations, because any normal person or half normal person would even tell you that it's a very suspicious act when uncounted votes exit the country's polling stations and are allegedly held in storage overnight. So folks, we have a couple of years to get our act together and demand change in Ireland's vote counting system. After the current system should never have been the case over the past 100 years, because it has brought nothing, only trouble, mayhem across the country of Ireland. The only way you're ever going to achieve genuine political representatives is if your votes are counted in your polling stations countrywide. Okay guys, enjoy your evening.